For more than 3 decades, one man has managed to hold a permanent spot on Interpol's most wanted list. He is the primary architect of a crime that left a lasting scar on the nation of Spain, yet he managed to vanish without leaving a single trace behind. This is the story of Antonio Anglés. His escape proves that the most terrifying criminals are sometimes the ones who simply walk away. On the evening of November 13, 1992, in the small town of Alcasser, Spain, 3 teenage girls were getting ready for a school party. Miriam, Desiree, and Antonia were 14 and 15 years old. To get to the venue in a neighboring town, they did what plenty of local teenagers did back then. They hitchhiked. A car pulled up near a local petrol station. 2 men were inside. The girls climbed inside, and the vehicle drove off into the night. No one ever saw them alive again. When the girls didn't come home, their terrified families immediately alerted the authorities. The Guardia Civil and local police launched a massive 75-day search operation that quickly became one of the largest in modern Spanish history. For over 2 months straight, the disappearance dominated Spanish television and daily news coverage. Search parties combed the Valencian region, while the entire country waited, hoping the 3 friends might still be found. The constant media coverage kept millions of people in a state of suspended hope. But that collective optimism masked a horrific reality that investigators were entirely unaware of until the search finally came to an end. On January 27, 1993, 2 local beekeepers made a grim discovery in a remote ravine near the town of Vedera. They found Miriam, Desiree, and Antonia in a shallow grave. Autopsy reports detailed a harrowing sequence of events. The physical evidence showed that the victims had suffered through hours of captivity, violence, and extreme sexual assault before they were murdered. Detectives quickly zeroed in on 2 local suspects, 23-year-old Miguel Ricart and 26-year-old Antonio Anglés. Police moved in rapidly and successfully took Ricart into custody. Under interrogation, Ricart confessed. He told investigators that after picking the girls up, Anglés violently struck them to gain control of the vehicle. They drove straight past the nightclub and forced the girls into an isolated, abandoned structure outside of town. The sheer brutality uncovered at the crime scene destroyed the illusion of safety in rural Spain. Parents stopped letting their teenagers hitchhike, and entire communities began locking their doors. But while Ricart was sitting in an interrogation room, Antonio Anglés was already gone. By the time authorities moved to arrest him, he had slipped through the net entirely. This map traces the early stages of his escape. Investigators tracked his confirmed movements west through Madrid before he managed to cross the border into Lisbon, Portugal. From Lisbon, the trail goes completely cold, leaving investigators with 2 unproven theories. The first suggests that Anglés boarded a maritime ferry heading north toward Ireland, slipping anonymously into Europe. The second theory hinges on his background. Because he held dual citizenship in the country of his birth, authorities suspected he might have secured passage on a cargo ship across the Atlantic to Brazil. Neither route was ever definitively confirmed. Without a verifiable direction, the international manhunt fractured into dead ends, and Anglés officially became a ghost. In 1997, Miguel Ricart was convicted for his role in the murders. However, due to strict sentencing caps in Spanish law at the time, he served roughly 17 years before being released in 2013. The official narrative has always been complicated by physical evidence. Autopsies recovered hair samples at the scene carrying DNA profiles that matched neither the 3 victims, nor Ricart, nor Antonio Anglés. To this day, investigators have not identified who those samples belong to. This gap in the forensic record is compounded by Ricart himself, who has recently given contradictory interviews, claiming that a larger group of uncharged men were present that night. Over 30 years later, the families of Miriam, Desiree, and Antonia are still living with these gaps in the timeline. They lack the full truth of what happened to their daughters. The enduring tragedy of the Alcasser case is that the primary architect of the crime never faced a courtroom. There is a high statistical probability that Antonio Anglés is currently alive, living under a different name in complete freedom. At 5:30 in the morning, a shattered Toyota Camry sat smoking on a quiet residential street in Ohio. This was Strongsville, a suburb just outside Cleveland. Inside the vehicle were 3 young people: 17-year-old Mackenzie Sharilla, her boyfriend Dominic Russo, and their friend Davion Flanagan. They had crashed on a residential road built for 25 miles per hour, but the impact occurred at nearly 100 miles per hour. The car slammed head-on into a commercial brick building, splitting the vehicle almost entirely in half. Dominic and Davion were pronounced dead at the scene. Mackenzie was pulled from the wreckage, badly injured but alive. Investigators also recovered marijuana and psilocybin mushrooms in her possession. Every piece of surface evidence pointed to a familiar, tragic narrative. Teenagers driving home from a graduation party, going way too fast while under the influence of drugs. When Mackenzie recovered enough to speak with investigators, she offered only one defense. She claimed total and complete amnesia regarding the drive home, but the crash site held a physical anomaly that refused to align with a story of a lost, disoriented driver. The pavement leading up to the brick wall was entirely pristine. There were 0 skid marks. Even in a state of panic or intoxication, basic human instinct forces a driver to tap the brakes or swerve before hitting a solid wall at that speed. Overriding that reflex requires physical effort. The complete absence of braking evidence forced law enforcement to drop the assumption of a simple traffic accident. Protocol shifted, and the site became an active criminal homicide investigation. Because the physical road offered no explanation for how the car hit the wall, investigators had to extract the digital reality hidden inside the vehicle itself. Prosecutors pulled the vehicle's event data recorder. You can think of it as the car's built-in black box. This graph plots telemetry from the final 5-second countdown, mapping vehicle speed, throttle, and brake application. The data showed the gas pedal instantly maxing out, pressed completely the entire time. Meanwhile, the brake axis stayed at 0. They opted for a bench trial, kept Mackenzie completely off the stand, and relied entirely on amnesia. They gambled that the sheer unknowability of a 17-year-old's mind in those final seconds would be enough for a judge to find reasonable doubt. But the silence of human memory is an incredibly weak defense when it goes up against the absolute certainty of machine telemetry. In August 2023, the judge delivered her verdict. She flatly rejected the amnesia defense, telling the courtroom, "This was not reckless driving. This was murder." Mackenzie was found guilty on 12 counts, resulting in 2 concurrent sentences of 15 years to life. Her family refused to accept the ruling, arguing there was no explicit evidence of her intent to harm anyone. But in 2026, the Ohio Supreme Court declined to hear her appeal, letting the conviction stand. Digital records now act as silent witnesses in the courtroom. In an era of highly precise telemetry, the accident defense loses its ground against the raw data logged in the final seconds of a drive. Dominic and Davion got in a car with someone they trusted, expecting a simple ride home. They had no idea a silent, digital decision behind the wheel had already sealed their fate.